Language awareness and teaching skills. Phonology, word and sentence stress. Stress and meaning. In the previous input, you learned about some of the basics of phonology, and you looked into phonemes, the IPA, and types of vowels and consonants. You also learned about two forms of controlled pronunciation practice, minimal pairs and drilling. In this input, let's have a more in-depth look at an area of pronunciation that can cause significant communication problems for our learners. So let's do an exercise. I'm going to dictate some words and you write them down. What do you notice about these words and why is it a problem? Let's go. 1. Important. 2. Comet. 3. Arrow. 4. Become. 5. Grammatical. The words you heard were important, commit, arrow, beacon, and grammatical. But I bet you had to stop and think because that's not what you heard. I changed the word stress. So the point here is that word stress can change the meaning or part of speech of a word, and inappropriate word stress can make the meaning difficult to grasp. Word stress and parts of speech. So let's go back to the idea of word stress and how it can change the part of speech of a word. Pause the video for a moment and discuss this with a partner. Say the words on the right and say the words on the left. They're either verbs or nouns. See if you can come up with a general rule that you can apply to these parts of speech. If you were able to write these words in IPA, this is what they'd look like, along with the symbol for stress placed before the stress symbol, which looks like an apostrophe. So what general rule can you derive from these examples? You probably realise that when you have two homographs, where one is a verb and the other a noun, the noun is usually stressed on the first syllable, while the verb is stressed on the final syllable. This helps us as listeners to distinguish between their uses, so we know if the speaker is using a verb or a noun. And of course, context helps us with this determination as well. The challenges for learners. So why do learners have challenges when adapting to word stress in English? Their first language might stress all the syllables, as in a syllable-timed language. In their first language, stress might create different words, for example in Mandarin. Pitch change, which is one aspect of stress, can change the entire meaning of the word in Mandarin Chinese. This pitch change significance is not readily transferred to English. Another possible reason is they just don't hear it, or they don't think it's important. In fact, it is vital, as 85% of all content words in English are stressed on the first syllable. We use this to predict where word boundaries are in a stream of speech. And finally, they may be taught by teachers who fully sound out each syllable, and so they never learn to put weak forms as well as strong forms into spoken practice. So what is stress? What happens to the sounds in the stressed or unstressed syllables? And how do we recognise a stressed sound? With your partner, discuss this briefly. There are three things which characterise stress on a syllable. The pitch moves up or down, or both. The vowel is lengthened, and the vowel is made louder. Let's look back at those words we asked you to write down in the first task. Important. How do we know that the second syllable is stressed? It's probably safe to assume that all of those three features come into play here. There is a pitch change, the vowel sound of that syllable is the longest, and it's probably the loudest as well. It's the same for grammatical, arrow. It's important to note here as well that word stress is fixed in English. meaning that whatever the word stress is for a particular word, it doesn't change. However, sentence stress, which we'll look at later, is not fixed and can change according to meaning the speaker wishes to express. So when talking about word stress and how it falls on a particular syllable or the syllables of a word, it's important to know exactly what a syllable is. So here's a quick exercise. Take your whole name and count out how many syllables there are in it. Tell your partner and check with each other that each of you are correct. So what is a syllable exactly? It's an uninterrupted unit of sound consisting of a vowel or a combination of a consonant and vowel. When you move to the next syllable, your jaw changes position. Now test each other and find out how many syllables there are in the following words. Now do this activity in your task sheet. Count out how many syllables in each word and underline the stressed syllable. This kind of question might appear in the language awareness exam, so it's important we get you thinking about word stress now. When you identify the stressed syllable, ensure you underline the whole syllable. This could just be one letter, but it would have to include a vowel sound. Any syllable will contain one vowel sound. Pause the video and do this with your partner now. So here are the answers. And don't worry, we didn't expect you to transcribe the words into IPA, but we thought it might make some of the more ambiguous ones clearer, such as the word brilliant, where there are two possible answers. How can you mark stress on a syllable? It's never too early to start introducing word stress to your students, and there are many ways you can indicate this. On a whiteboard, you could use one of these following ways. You could draw squares above the stressed syllable, or circles above the stressed syllable. Small circles above unstressed syllables and larger above the stressed ones. You could put an apostrophe symbol before the stressed syllable. This is how it's done in IPA. You could underline the stressed syllable, use bigger letters, or a different colour. Use whichever one you feel comfortable with, as long as you keep it consistent for your learners and it makes the concept clear. For the exam, you'll be asked to underline the stressed syllable. How can we demonstrate stress? Here are some other ways you can use to demonstrate word stress to your learners. We previously saw that we should aim for a multi-sensory approach to teaching younger children, so let's consider the activation in these techniques. For auditory learning, you could hum the pattern of the word stress rather than say the word, so banana could be mm-hmm. For visual learning, you could move your hand up and down to show the stress of the word, or move your head. And we know that children like to learn by doing, so you could ask them to stand up or sit down in groups to indicate the word stress. This is particularly fun for young learners. You could do this by putting a number of chairs at the front of the classroom and calling out words that the children know. You should keep it in the same lexical field, for example animals. So let's take the word elephant. There are 3 syllables. So the children have to decide first how many syllables, and then send that number of children to the front of the room. They either stand or sit in the chairs to indicate the stress of the word. After that, you could all practice saying the words again with the correct stress. Are there any rules for word stress? Yes, there are, and here's a list that you'll also find in your task sheet for future reference. There's some general rules of thumb which can guide and help learners in predicting where word stress might fall. In your own time, you might want to come up with further examples and note these down on your task sheet as well. We won't spend time looking at these here. You'll find them written in a list on your task sheet. Country names and word stress. So let's do an exercise. Firstly, with a partner or a group, Clap one of the stress patterns that you see here. The others guess which one it is. Then, put the countries on the worksheet in the appropriate word stress column. Pause the video and do this now. So here are the answers. And you should have found out that New Zealand was the odd one out. Sentence stress and rhythm. Now let's have a look at sentence stress. Which parts of speech do we usually stress in a sentence? Discuss this with your partner now. If you have to take notes or note down a quick message, which words do you leave out? Usually, it's pronouns, auxiliaries, prepositions, articles and conjunctions. We note down the words conveying the greatest amount of meaning: nouns, main verbs, negative auxiliaries, adjectives and adverbs. And these are also known as content words. It's worth pointing that out again. So the words we stress are the words conveying the greatest amount of meaning. And they are nouns, main verbs, negative auxiliaries, adjectives and adverbs. Here's a matching activity for you to do. Here are 3 examples. Black or white? Where are you from? I go there a lot. So 3 stress patterns. In your task sheet, match the sentences to one of these stress patterns. We've done a couple of examples to get you started. And here are the answers. So let's conclude that in speech, English stresses content words, or words which convey the most meaning, and it tends not to stress other word classes unless their contribution to meaning is special. Sometimes we stress other words because the meaning is significant. For example, when we want to emphasize a point. Let's look at that now. Emphatic stress. What happens to vowels in unstressed words? Let's do an exercise to find out. I'll give you a prompt and you have to answer using only the sentence, "I want a cup of tea." The main stress in the sentence will depend on the emphasis you want to give. So let's demonstrate with the first one here. Here's the prompt. Do you want a cup of coffee? How would you respond to that prompt using this sentence? Well, you'd probably say, I want a cup of tea. You want to emphasize the word tea to contrast with coffee. Now try the rest, and I'll read you the prompts. As you go, notice the change in sentence stress depends on which word you want to emphasize. And also notice what happens to the vowels in the unstressed words. Okay, number 1. Does he want a cup of tea? Does he want a cup of tea? 2. Do you want a bucket of tea? Do you want a bucket of tea? 3. Do you have a cup of tea? Do you have a cup of tea? 4. Do you want 2 cups of tea? Do you want 2 cups of tea? So this is likely what you'll have said in response to the prompts I've just given. I've stressed the word by highlighting it and making it bold. You will have noticed that the vowels in the unstressed words change. Actually, in many cases, they change to the schwa, and it's estimated that in fast speech, about 20% of all language and 90% of all vowels are the schwa sound. So let's think about contrastive stress. So here's a good task. Look at the sentences in the column on the right. You'll notice they're all the same. No, I went to Shanghai last Tuesday. With your partner, look at the prompts in the column on the left and decide why some of the words in the sentences in the right are in red. Pause the video and discuss this now. You may have noticed that certain words are in red because they're stressed. They highlight the difference in meaning from the statement in the column on the left. Let's look at the first example. I hear Frank went to Shanghai last Tuesday. No, I went to Shanghai last Tuesday. You wish to contrast the wrong information with the correct information, and so reformulate the sentence. You stress the correct word that you want to emphasize. No, I went to Shanghai last Tuesday. And when any particular word or words are stressed, the accompanying words are weakened, they become weak forms. It's not a matter of stressing all the words, with one stressed even more. Now, again, work with your partner. One of you is A and the other is B. A, read a response, A to H, and B, say which statement it corresponds to, 1 to 8. After doing a couple, swap roles. Pause the video and have a go at this now. So we stress words which have most significance in meaning. But what effect might stressing the wrong words or all the words have on your listeners? Well, it could sound weird, or the meaning becomes unclear, or it comes across as rude, boring, or simply not part of your language community. Let's take a look at stress-timed and syllable-timed languages. From this picture, can you make a guess at what differences there are between the two? In English, the amount of time it takes to say something doesn't depend on the number of syllables, whereas for a syllable-timed language, it does. Have a look at the first example here. Read it out loud and notice where the sentence stress falls on the content words, which are the nouns, dogs and cats, and the main verb chase. Dogs chase cats. The first sentence, which is only 3 words and 3 syllables long, takes the same amount of time to say in English as the last sentence, which has 7 words and 8 syllables. Why is this? Pause the video and discuss it with your partner. Weak forms, or unstressed words, and strong forms, or the stressed words, are the basis of a stress-time language. If you imagine clapping along to the stressed words in the dogs and cats examples here, all the unstressed words fit into the small intervals of time between the claps. Dogs chase cats. The dogs chase cats. The dogs chase the cats. The dogs will chase the cats. The dogs will be chasing the cats. With this in mind, quickly discuss with your partner why Chinese speakers have trouble with sentence stress. Pause the video and talk about this now. Learners whose first language can be described as syllable-timed, such as Chinese speakers, often have problems recognizing and therefore producing features of English such as contractions, main and secondary stress, and elision, which we'll talk about in the connected speech input in week 5. A quick recap. In syllable-timed languages such as Chinese, each syllable is given equal prominence and stress. Vowels are not reduced the way they are in stress-time languages such as English. In syllable-time languages, each syllable takes approximately the same amount of time to pronounce, and they lack reduced vowels, whereas stress-time languages, like English, have approximately the same amount of time between stress syllables, and it's achieved through contractions, weak forms, and other features of connected speech. And out of interest, here are some examples of stress-timed and syllable-timed languages. Summing up. In this input, you've looked at word stress and sentence stress, and we focused on the features that characterize stress, how word stress is fixed in English, and we discussed how it's important to raise our learners' awareness of this, because incorrect usage causes confusion. We also touched on ways that word stress could be highlighted in the classroom. We've looked at sentence stress, and we've seen that it isn't fixed, and how in speech, English stresses content words and tends not to stress other word classes, unless their contribution to meaning is special. Sometimes we stress other words because the meaning is significant, for emphasis or for contrast. We discussed what happens to vowel sounds in unstressed words as compared to their strong forms, and we looked at the difference between syllable-timed and stress-timed languages. So spend some time now to review and tidy up your notes and write down any questions you have, highlight any information and concepts you want to check and clarify. Thanks for watching, and see you at the next online tutorial.